changes that occur as the sun moves through its cycle through the cosmos. One of the things that I enjoyed about the summer is that Barbara and I got in the car every once in a while and drove off and had different kinds of adventures. Sometimes we got on the bus and had an adventure. One day we were walking about at the Fringe Festival, and we were just enjoying seeing all the moms and dads, all the grandmas and grandpas, all the kids, the music in the air, the festivity, the food to be enjoyed. We loved it that this was a community space where community gathered to celebrate life in all of its goodness. Now, we enjoyed the Fringe, but we didn't decide to go to any of the shows. We decided let's walk across the street, and we went to the Museum of Man and History, Man and Nature. The Natural Museum, as it's called. The Manitoba. Thank you. Ministers would be lost without congregations to set them straight. But we went to walk about that museum, and we enjoyed it because it showed us in 3 dimensions a bit of the history of our experience in this land. And one of my favorite moments, because when I was a young man I used to come regularly, and one of my favorite moments was to sit beside the Nonsuch, that little boat that had a group of people in it who came across a stormy ocean to discover a new land, the Nonsuch. And thinking about that this week, I realized that along with all the baggage, along with all the personalities, the Nonsuch also carried 2 things that probably nobody on board was aware of. One, there were germs, bacteria, that we carried from Europe and we brought here, and those germs infected peoples here because they didn't have immune systems ready for such germs. They were well adapted to the natural environment, but what we brought from Europe was infectious, and it hurt many of the indigenous people. Now there's another thing that was on the boat that many people might not have been thinking about, and that was ideas. And ideas from Europe were carried on that boat and brought to this country. And those ideas were as destructive, or perhaps even more destructive, than the germs and bacteria that we brought. Because these ideas, when we began to implement them, devastated, exploited, and oppressed the people who lived in this land. And we are a people now who are recognizing this history, and so in our churches we make a point of acknowledging our respect for indigenous people. Our realization that they are human beings made in the image of God, just like we are. But the indigenous people in our country are still suffering from the ideas that we brought over here. And not only the indigenous people. We are now beginning to realize that the ideas we brought from Europe have been very costly to us as human beings. All of us as human beings. We recognize now, and I'm very, very pleased because the young people are especially becoming aware of this, and they're wanting to get engaged and do something about it. But what happened is we created a culture that was destructive to our human being and destructive to the earth itself. We now recognize that we are in a perilous place as a species, as a planetary system. We are at a moment of decision. We are going to continue going the way we have been going, or we are going to stop, look, listen, and make a decision, each of us in our hearts, to do things differently. To do things in such a way that nature is respected and not exploited. The philosophers and thinkers of Europe, about a century before the Nonsuch sailed across the ocean, had the idea that God was irrelevant to us, and that we were the masters of our own destiny, and we were the shapers of our future. And we decided that what we would do is overcome, subordinate the natural world, and make the human world prominent. And that has led us to the pollution of our water, the pollution of our air, the spreading of multiple diseases, the destruction of well-being in families as they are divided by the messages they get from the world system saying, us is not important, me is important. The whole idea of individualism is contrary to the way of God in the world. The way of God is expressed as community. We were at a funeral yesterday, and the minister gave a little talk, and the talk included a little story. And the little story was about a tree that was growing tall and beautiful and perfect. And they took a saw, and they sawed the tree like this, but it didn't fall down. And the reason it didn't fall down, because its branches were intermingled with the branches of all the trees around it. And the trees supported the cut tree, so it couldn't fall down. That's how it is in our human experience. We are not alone. And sometimes life comes and tries to cut us down. And we are supported by our family. We are supported by our friends. We are supported by our neighbors. And we are made able to endure whatever circumstance brings against us. Now, the texts today are very important texts. They are not just relevant to the days in which they were written. They are texts that stress memory. Jeremiah says, remember, you were slaves, you were oppressed, you were exploited, you groaned, you longed to be liberated. And God heard your groaning, God heard your longing, and God appointed a person, Moses. And God set in motion a program which ended up as liberation, setting an oppressed people free. And the image of Egypt and its oppression is a core image of the biblical narratives. For the Jewish people in particular, the Exodus story was the heart and the soul of their experience with God. God was creator, yes, but God was liberator, savior. Now, I've decided that I have to carry my little piece of paper. I'm 69 years old, and up until now I've been able to talk without looking at my notes. And last week I realized, oh, George, the clutch is getting slippery. The psalm notices about our relationship with God. And the psalm celebrates that in our relationship with God, we discover joy. We discover well-being. We discover the meaning and the purpose of life. But the psalm goes on to say, if we turn away from God, then we will experience, and I'll say it basically, simply, we will experience what we are experiencing now. Jeremiah remembers that God delivered a people, liberated a people, and brought them into a good land. And then the text goes on to say, they spoiled that good land. They ruined that good land. They began to serve their selfish desires, and they began to forget that God was their creator. God was their savior. God was their accompanier, and they ended up in deep trouble. And when I read the text from Jeremiah, I realized that if God was to talk to our modern generation, God would say, look, people, I brought you into this land, a wonderful land, a land filled with benefits and blessings. I brought you here, and you ruined it. You ruined it by your appetites for power. You ruined it by your appetites for profit. You ruined it by your appetites for pride. And Jeremiah is one who says things as they are. He doesn't soften it up. He lets people know they're in trouble. But he also lets people know that there's a way out. And the psalm lets us know this as well. And when we get to the Hebrews text, that's when we get to have hints or intimations about what the way out is. And the text begins with continue in mutual love. That is to say, be together as a body, be together as a community, work together, live together, play together. Do things together. This is an invitation to overcome individualism. Because individualism is basically the result of a strategy called divide and conquer. Now Hebrews goes on to speak about some of the things that vex us. One of the things is sexual immorality. And I thought about this week and I realized that my whole time growing up brought into play a change of how we see each other as persons. I'm not saying that these ideas weren't always in the background, but what happened is they came into the foreground. And these ideas were expressed in advertising. And in advertising, what we began to see was sex brought into the front and the center. We began to see images of children dressed as young women with bikini tops and bikini bottoms, and they were being trained to consume goods to make them look sexy. And that problem is so deep, but it also serves the economy well. Because if you can frustrate a child sexually at the age of puberty, if they try and get no pleasure out of it, real pleasure, then their appetite is frustrated. And they begin to desire more and more. And this serves the corporate powers very well. Now, it's not just sexuality, but the ideas that started this country, ideas of God, were overturned, and the ideas became all about how can you get the most out of life for yourself and your kind. That's so problematic. Life is not about yourself and your kind. The funeral we went to yesterday was for a friend of ours, Jesmyn Thompson. Some of you may have known her. And during the funeral, they told stories about this woman's life. And in the end, we all realized that this woman might have been what the text speaks about. Who knows, when you're kind to somebody, you may have met an angel unawares. It became clear to us as we listened to the stories about this woman's life that she had been a caring personality everywhere she lived. Everything she did was to support and encourage others. She poured herself out so that others could be blessed. Now Jesus tells a parable. And the parable is about being invited to a table. And remember, a parable is not to be read literally. It's to be read as a story, providing opportunity to learn something about life. Something that can't be expressed in plain language. And the parable here is about being invited to a table. Now let's call the table Earth's bounty. We are all invited to participate in Earth's bounty. And some of us go to that table proud. It's ours. It's mine. I can do with it as I wish. But the parable suggests that this way is not the way of God. The way of God is, yes, this is the table. I am so pleased to be included in it. I am so pleased. I'm just going to take a little place here in the corner. I'm going to enjoy myself. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Overturn pride. Allow humility to be established in your heart. And I saw a definition of humility on the sign outside of Westminster United Church this week. And it said humility is not to think less of yourself. That is to say, God does not want us to be ashamed for the way we've been behaving as a people. God does not want us to feel guilty. The little saint said, it's not about putting yourself down. It's about putting yourself second. And being the best you can be. Being as good as you are able. Doing all that you can to be kind, generous, compassionate. To stand in solidarity with those who are suffering. And to avoid the temptations of the marketplace. And that's hard for us as modern people. But Jesus gives us an example. Jesus is the one God sent to save us. And Jesus saved us by setting an example so that we could follow that example. The kings and the priests were also setting examples. They were setting examples of being high and mighty. When they walked down the street, people would bow down to them. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. Jesus is not looking to that kind of priesthood. Jesus is not looking to that kind of government. Instead, Jesus steps out. He gets baptized. He goes into the wilderness. He gets tempted. He says no. He goes back, and what does he do? Every time he meets a hurting person, he stops to get involved. He shares the life of God, and in sharing the life of God, he renews people. They were suffering, now they are rejoicing. The examples are multiple in the Scripture. I am hoping that at this time in human history, more and more persons will step out of the one way, the way that is leading to destruction, and enter the other way, the way that is leading to revival, to renewal, to healing. Let's become part of what God is doing in the earth, even if it means saying no to what the religious and political leaders are doing in the world. And if you're paying attention, you realize that the religious and political leaders are now doing things that are not very well thought out. They are planning war as the solution to our human problems. I will propose that to pick up kindness is much better than to pick up a gun. Let's let the love of God enter us and flow through us, and in this way bring blessings to all of our relations. May it be so.